and then put it out on the stoop on Saturday, and yeah,
literally the next day
it was munched. It was.
Like it didn't even last for Halloween?
No, when I was coming up to the house one day, I literally saw one of the squirrels eating it.
Squirrels.
It is what it is. When I was door knocking today, there were numerous pumpkins that were still untouched, and I was like, "What lucky people these people are."
Maybe they have some deterrent, like they put some cayenne pepper.
I thought I should spray next year. I should spray my pumpkin with something, but either that or the squirrels in their neighborhood just don't have a taste for pumpkins.
We've got some bad squirrels around here.
So
this is live. Right?
This is live. We are live on the internet. We don't have any
right
viewers.
Now?
Yeah, we're streaming.
Yeah.
We don't have any viewers yet, but we'll get there hopefully. And there's the YouTube audience that'll watch this later. But hi everyone, this is Press Skol episode 9. I'm here with my roommate and friend Preston and his +1 Rachel. And as you may have seen in the Facebook and Twitter posts about this episode, we are doing something a little different this week. Consider this a public service announcement version of Press Skol, or almost a member drive-esque version of Press Skol. We are going to be talking about Tuesday, about Election Day, giving you a preview of what is going on in Minnesota politics. Fun fact about me, I love football, but I think my first love is democracy. And so if you are watching live with us and you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer those. Preston's going to be doing the heavy lifting on the gameplay front today, because when I start talking politics, I get even more distracted.
I actually thought you were going to say I'm going to do the heavy lifting in terms of talking about politics today, because you really need to focus on the game, but I realized that would not make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Part of my motivation for this, beyond just loving politics and being excited about the election, is we're playing the Detroit Lions today. This will be the first of 2 matchups with them. And you know what? It's kind of a blah game, in my opinion. We're going to be able to preview this matchup again later this season. And so I figured we'd save the good stuff for that second matchup. Instead of focusing too much on it here. And the only thing I'll say about the matchup is that in our Madden franchise, the Lions are currently 0-7.
Oof, rough.
And so no pressure on us to give them their first victory. We're at 3-5, and so this is an important game for us. But we'll take care of business. So,
I got a feeling we will.
We need to switch controllers though, because you're gonna start at the quarterback. You're gonna do most of the play calling. I have not. We forgot to do our audio check. So hopefully the mic is working. If one of our Twitch viewers would be kind enough to hop into the chat and let us know if the audio is not working, that would be much appreciated. I guess let us know either way. A message letting us know that all is well would be great. The other thing I want to note before the game starts is that today is Extra Life. Extra Life is a campaign where every year a bunch of gamers get online and they live stream for 24 hours, and they raise money for children's hospitals. Today is like the big day, the gameplay day for Extra Life. And so we wanted to jump in on that and be part of it. And so we've set up a donation page. We won't be streaming for 24 hours, mercifully, but for the next hour and a half we'll be streaming. And we've got a donation page at extraLife.org/participant/press-skol. I will drop that in the chat.
It looks like we already have a donation.
Do we?
Yeah. Because I just donated.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Nice job,
Getting
man.
it started.
Hopefully that will inspire some other folks to jump in and do it as well. That money, I've designated for that money to go to Gillette Children's Hospital here in Minneapolis. So going to a very good cause. And as I said, I've just dropped that link into the Twitch chat for anyone who's interested. The game's underway. We are starting on defense.
Ooh.
We've got an odd camera angle. It seems farther out than I'm used to.
I think it is. I think I hit the wrong thing.
But I don't mind. I actually don't mind. I kind of like.
You like that?
A little bit, having a little bit more of a bird's eye view.
Do you like that?
So let's talk about this election. Minnesota is a wild state right now for the midterm elections. I think it's one of the most watched states in the country. Preston, you have voted absentee, so
Yes.
you have already done your civic duty. Rachel, do you have a plan to vote on election day? All right, great. So let's just dive in, and we're going to start at the top of the ticket. Before I begin, I want to note that I will be presenting all this information in as nonpartisan a way as possible. My intention here is just to give people information about what they're going to see on the ballot, what the themes of the campaign have been, what the backgrounds of the candidates have been. Call it almost a public radio approach here. I just want to inform you about what's going on in Minnesota politics and not advance necessarily an agenda or tell you who to vote for. And so at the top of the ballot is the Minnesota governor's race. That is between the Democrat Tim Walz and the Republican Jeff Johnson. Walz is a 6-term member of the U.S. Congress, first elected in 2006. He represents the 1st Congressional District in southern Minnesota. He was a military veteran, a teacher, and a football coach. He represented a more rural part of the state, and so he's tended to be, throughout his career, a more moderate Democrat. One of the themes that really was particularly prominent during the primary campaign was that he had supported gun interests more prominently early in his career. He took money from the NRA and had gotten positive grades from the NRA. And I think that's not uncommon for Minnesota politicians who represent more rural areas, but he had to kind of weather some criticism during the primary as a result of that. Walz is sharing the ticket. His lieutenant governor candidate is Peggy Flanagan. Peggy Flanagan is a member of the state legislature. She represents the the western suburbs of Minneapolis. She actually was first elected pretty recently. I think she's only a 1 or 2 term representative. However, she's considered a bit of a rising star. She spoke at the 2016 Democratic National Convention, which was a big moment for her. And she is a member of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. And so if that ticket wins, she would be the first indigenous lieutenant governor in the history of Minnesota. The Republican candidate, Jeff Johnson, is a former state legislator. He served 3 terms. He served the northwest suburbs of the Twin Cities. He currently is a county commissioner in Hennepin County. And he ran for governor against Mark Dayton in the last gubernatorial election, but lost. He also ran for attorney general in 2006 and lost. So this will be his second crack at the governorship. His lieutenant governor candidate is a woman named Donna Bergstrom. She ran for the state senate in 2016, but did not win. She's from the Duluth area, which is close to where Preston and I grew up.
Yep.
She's a veteran. She had 20 years of experience in the U.S. Marine Corps, and she is also a member of an indigenous community. She's a member of Red Lake Nation, and so regardless of which ticket wins, the state of Minnesota will have its first indigenous lieutenant governor.
Which is awesome.
So, Preston, we gave up some yardage there, but we managed to bend and not break, right?
Yep, that's right.
Detroit's challenging this, which is bizarre.
He looked out of bounds to me,
But
but
he
I guess
also,
we'll see.
I believe he also dropped it. No, it came out of his hands.
Mile out of bounds.
So, yeah, that's a nice angle there, though. Nice
It's not
camera.
college. You need to get both feet in and maintain it through the ground, usually.
Yeah, I would be surprised if. Yep. So
Well, I'm gonna go safe here. We've had a few fakes,
we have had some fakes.
so
Talking about the polls in the governor's election, Tim Walz has led in pretty much all the polls, usually by anywhere from 4 to 8 points, and so the narrative is that Walz is the favorite, but it could be a pretty close race regardless of the polls. The themes of the candidates, Tim Walz his mantra has been one Minnesota, really trying to unify the metropolitan area and greater Minnesota, trying to campaign really on a positive message as opposed to more negative messaging. Jeff Johnson's argument has been that Minnesota needs a change, that there's kind of some frustration at the direction that the state's been going after 8 years of Mark Dayton, and that it's time for something new. He's kind of been doing the opposite of what Walz is doing. He's been focusing a lot of that frustration. He's been focusing on urban-rural divides, about how a lot of rural Minnesotans have been frustrated in the Dayton administration, whether it's agricultural issues like buffer strips, whether it's just other economic issues related to greater Minnesota. And so that's really been his focus.
I have a question, Adam, that maybe when you look at Minnesota kind of statistically where it ranks in terms of how their policies have affected our economy and things of that nature, and you look and see that Minnesota is a state that's had a surplus, that's been doing really well. When a candidate like Jeff Johnson says that things aren't going well, how is that being interpreted, and like how are they seeing it differently in terms of, is it just a sheer lack of like too much government control versus
Johnson has been advancing some pretty common messages about that you would expect a Republican to advance. Oh, that did not work. I was playing as David Morgan there, and you threw
were
that
you?
one away. Yeah, which did not work so well for us. So I think usually what you'll see is candidates who are out of power will focus on change narratives, on the fact that we need something different. Whereas it's more likely that if a party is trying to keep control, whether we're talking about a gubernatorial race or even a presidential election, if a party is trying to keep control, they'll focus on positive messages, because they want to talk about the victories and the progress that's been made over the previous 4 or 8 years.
Sure.
Jeff Johnson has been advancing some pretty common Republican messages about government getting too involved in our lives. Again, that cuts across many issue areas, whether we're talking about agriculture, with Governor Dayton passed a buffer strip law that requires farmers to put buffer strips on their lands to ensure that fertilizer and other pollutants don't make it into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we talk about healthcare with the launch of MNsure, the Affordable Care Act exchange in Minnesota, things where he sees government being too involved in our lives and wants to get government out of the way for people. And so I think the message of change and the message of those Republican messages work well in this case, because we've had 8 years of Mark Dayton. The other thing, I think the biggest issue of all, if we go beyond the campaigns themselves, because the campaigns may want to try to stay positive, what's worth noting is that you have a bunch of interest groups and PACs who are getting really involved in the race. Most of the negative TV ads you see aren't run by the campaigns themselves, but are run by political action committees or super PACs.
Sure.
And most of those have been focusing on healthcare. The dominant issue, whether we're talking about the gubernatorial race or we're talking about the election in general, is going to be healthcare. And so what you have on the Republican side is you have them highlighting how MNsure has not been super successful in their eyes, and premiums have been volatile, and some people have been priced out of healthcare. and they want to get government out of the way per se and give people more control in picking their health plans. Meanwhile, what the Democrats have been doing over and over and over again is highlighting this issue of pre-existing conditions, essentially making Republicans own up to the policies that they've advanced through the Trump era. So last summer, the Republicans tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have had a lot of negative implications for people with pre-existing conditions, because one of the signature achievements of the Affordable Care Act was preventing insurance companies for declining coverage or pricing people out of the market because of pre-existing conditions. And so that's become a political hot point. That's been one of the most popular parts of the healthcare law. And so the Democrats have been really making Republicans be accountable for that repeal effort and for being against the Affordable Care Act. And so a lot of the ads have been testimonials of people with different health conditions talking about how under a Jeff Johnson governorship, they would lose protections that they currently have, and they would either pay a lot more for health insurance or they would lose their health insurance.
Gotcha.
And so that's really been the big issue. So we've got one race down, and it's not boding well for our on-the-field performance so far.
It's true,
but in my opinion, it's a worthy price to pay because we are educating the voters. But we're driving here, so that's good.
See if we can't do what we need to do here.
We got a 3rd and 1, and you're going to QB sneak it, right?
That's right. All thanks to Jim.
Yeah, Jim. That's the Jim Broughton strategy, and it's worked. It's worked pretty well. That yard looks pretty long, though. Not the longest yard, but a long yard.
He didn't go to the right side.
Yeah, he really had room behind. I guess we got to do that again.
Guess we gotta.
He had a lot of room behind the left guard, but he went to the right.
I even switched it to the other way.
Huh. Interesting. Well, this is a big play, and so I'm gonna hold us for just a moment while you execute here. Are you reversing it again, or no?
Nope.
All right. And I think he got plenty.
He still goes the same way.
Yeah, he got plenty that time though. So our second race is the race for the U.S. Senate. The candidates in this race are Amy Klobuchar and Jim Newberger. I'm not going to spend too much time on this race because the fact of the matter is that Amy Klobuchar is a lock to win this race. Amy was first elected in 2006, and she will, if she wins, she'll be getting her 3rd term in the Senate. She is a shoo-in for this race, and she is a potential presidential nominee in 2020. In the national media, there are a lot of whispers that she could be a pretty viable candidate for the presidency in 2020. I think if we were trying to draw a football analogy here, are you about to do our play?
That's right.
All right, let's run this play, and then we'll continue talking about this Senate race.
Who are you?
I am going to be David Morgan.
All right, well, if you are...
I'm going to make sure I get off the line.
Let me know if it's man.
It looks like a zone to me. It didn't seem like there was a lot of room there.
No.
So good to tuck and run there. To make a football analogy, I would argue that Amy Klobuchar is basically like the Adam Thielen of senators.
Woo!
Which is to say that she's not going to be... she's beloved. So when I was at the Viking game last week, I was struck by how many Thielen jerseys there were. They were everywhere, and so I think he's quickly become one of the most popular Vikings, and rightfully so. I mean, he's
breaking records.
He's breaking records. If he crosses 100 yards this weekend, that'll be his 9th straight game of 100 yards or more, which will set a new NFL record.
And he started the season with that.
Exactly.
So.
And it would surpass the current record, which is held by Calvin Johnson, former Lion. So it would be cool to see that in this game against the Lions. But Amy Klobuchar is a rare breed in today's politics in that she is well respected and well regarded, not just by Democrats, but by a lot of Republicans. She tends to do well, not just amongst key Democratic constituencies in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but also in greater Minnesota. Her reputation for constituent service is pretty strong, and her reputation for crossing the aisle in Congress to advance bipartisan bills is also pretty well noted. Her candidate, Jim Newberger, or her opponent, Jim Newberger, is a member of the State House. He was wide open.
You ran the wrong route.
Oh, I thought if I wasn't touching my controller that he wouldn't go anywhere.
No.
Or I thought if I wasn't touching the controller that the computer would take over.
No.
But apparently not. I will switch to an offensive lineman. You did have a guy open running a deep crossing pattern towards the end zone, though, at least from what I could tell. Jim Newberger is a member of the Minnesota State House of Representatives, first elected in 2012. His district is near St. Cloud, and he's really doing yeoman's work running against Amy Klobuchar. It's not something that a lot of people would sign up to do. Another kind of Minnesota connection and fun fact about Amy Klobuchar is that her dad, Jim Klobuchar, was a very popular media personality. He was a sports columnist for the Star Tribune for many years. He's written books about football and about travel. And so for Minnesotans of a certain age, Jim Klobuchar is far more well-known, perhaps even more than Amy. And I think that does contribute to her popularity as well, is that a lot of people remember her dad very fondly. You put a lot of faith in me to do that kick while I was while I was in the middle of talking, and it wasn't a great release. I botched the release a little bit, but he still makes it.
All right, one possession game.
So, in most scenarios, in almost every scenario, a state should only have one U.S. Senate election, one U.S. senator up for election in any given election. But Minnesota is in a very rare situation this year in that both of our U.S. senators will be on the ballot. And that is because Al Franken resigned his office earlier this year. Folks may remember that there was the photo of him groping a woman at a USO event. And there were other allegations of groping and inappropriate behavior, which led Al Franken to resign his office. Accordingly, Governor Dayton needed to appoint a replacement. He appointed his lieutenant governor, Tina Smith, and so now Tina Smith needs to run in a special election if she's going to serve out the remaining 2 years of Al Franken's term. And so that's why we have 2 U.S. senators on the ballot this year.
Gotcha.
And the second U.S. Senate election should be far more competitive. We have Democrat Tina Smith, as noted, appointed by Governor Dayton, and we have Republican Karen Housley running against Tina Smith. Tina Smith is relatively new to public life. Prior to being Governor Dayton's lieutenant governor, she was his chief of staff. And prior to that, she was the mayor of Minneapolis as chief of staff. That's a very nice interception there by Xavier Rhodes, and he's got some daylight.
That was a good play call.
Yeah, that worked out quite well. It looked like Stafford overthrew it a little bit.
He did, but I disguised a zone and had Sendejo come up, and I disguised it to look like blitz. So good job by Xavier Rhodes staying deep, and he reaps the benefit of that blitz, and there we go. Turnover City.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good momentum turn. We haven't had a ton of defensive turnovers in our last couple games. So as noted, prior to entering public life, Tina Smith was more of a staffer. She had been the chief of staff for Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Ryback. She was the chief of staff for Governor Dayton in his first term, but then in his second term, she became his lieutenant governor, and then she was appointed the U.S. Senator. She was an executive for Planned Parenthood earlier in her career as well. As for her opponent, Karen Housley, Housley is a state senator. She was actually first elected in 2016, and so she's actually in the midst of her first term in in the state senate. I hope that was a throwaway, or was that just an overthrow?
Well, I think it was an overthrow.
Okay, I was a little nervous that another pick might result there, but so Karen Housley is relatively new to public life as well, being in the midst of her first term in the state senate. She did run for the state senate in 2010 as well, but did not win. She was a beneficiary of how the state legislative districts were redrawn after 2010. Her district covers the northeastern suburbs of the Twin Cities, all the way up to Forest Lake. Prior to being involved in state politics, she was media. She was in media. She was a television producer, and she wrote a book on investing focused on women, I think. And she also hosted a radio show in the Twin Cities. That was something that I actually didn't know about her until I did some research yesterday. The themes in this election have reflected a lot of what we talked about in the governor's race. Healthcare has been a big focus. And Tina Smith, I swear the computer, I'm open. Oh, that looked almost like a little shovel pass.
I tried to.
I swear, I thought if I...
You're in my way.
Well, and I thought if I didn't touch anything, the computer would just run the route as designed. But
I'm pretty sure I called a run, but I got hit on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been a touchdown.
Yeah, I had nobody on me once I did get my act together and released. So one of the wrinkles is the beyond the healthcare focus. I've seen a lot of ads in the Housley-Smith race that have focused on pharmaceuticals. Ads against Housley have been noting that she sides with big pharma, and that you're you better hike this quick. Noted that if she's elected and her policy preferences are advanced, that Minnesotans will pay more for prescription drugs. Tina Smith has noted that while being in the U.S. Senate, she has been really focusing on making prescription drugs cheaper for people. And so that's really been one of the wrinkles. The negative ads in this race have been pretty significant as well. There's a new ad that just came out that claims that has Housley claiming that Tina Smith has profited from the opioid crisis. This has been related to... Oh, he dropped it.
Rare.
Yeah, you don't see that very often. This is related to the fact that Tina Smith's husband is a shareholder in one of Minnesota's, I think, St. Jude Medical, or some local healthcare company. And fact checkers have said that it's basically a stretch to make the argument that the ad makes, that Tina Smith is profiting off the opioid crisis, but there you go. The negative ads from Housley have been focusing on the fact that, or for Smith towards Housley, have been arguing that Housley is out of touch. Did he drop that too?
Yep.
Do you think you can handle this kick? This is a shorty. Tina Smith, in the short time that she's been a senator, has tried to focus a lot on constituent service as well, traveling all around Minnesota and talking to people. And so I think she's had a lot of positive ads talking about her interactions with Minnesotans, on really trying to be a problem solver. You could really read it as trying to emulate that Amy Klobuchar playbook of going beyond politics, trying to be bipartisan, trying to be a problem solver, and focusing on people first. And so I think some of the negative ads towards Housley have been arguing that she's not as fit in that regard, that she's going to advance a Republican Party line. And so with that, you have the two U.S. Senate races. We are clawing our way back here. We're at 10-6 here, and so it seems like we're stabilizing a bit.
Trying.
Are you keeping up on the politics?
Yeah, I'm listening.
All right. Let's see if we can't get another big defensive play here. Oh, Limbo had a chance.
Wow, that was
another major overthrow. I accidentally switched to the defensive.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't hit circle
I'm
ever.
trying like heck to stay out of the way, but it can be difficult.
Yeah, you can just turn that controller off if you want.
I could, but that feels like it would violate the spirit of the show. I'll just stay on the defensive line, and to your point, I will never hit circle. Oh, but I made that tackle.
There you go.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about politics for a moment there. So moving on from the U.S. Senate, next we have the United States House of Representatives. Minnesota has 8 congressional districts. What's really interesting, and another reason that Minnesota is really in the national spotlight, is that 4 out of our 8 congressional districts, half of them are very competitive right now. And that is going to be a lot higher than what you're going to see in most states. With demographic trends and with... Ooh, another chance at a pick there, but he swats it.
It's all right. 4th down.
Oh, that was 3rd down. So with demographic trends and gerrymandering being what it is, most states don't have a lot of competitive congressional districts. Most of them are pretty safely Republican or safely Democrat, democratically held. But in Minnesota, a full half of ours are competitive. Now, other factors contribute to that. Incumbents who are leaving to pursue other positions or retiring. But, you know, nationally, why the midterms matter is because the Democratic Party is looking to take control of the U.S. House back from the Republicans so that they can be a check against Donald Trump.
Oh, my gosh. That was a good play by Slay.
Yeah, you had that was one-on-one coverage,
It
right?
was. I tried to put it up there for him.
So, what you basically have, the balance of power in the nation's capital right now, is you have a Republican president, you have a House of Representatives held by Republicans, and you have a Senate held by Republicans. And so the Democrats, their best hope of having a check on Donald Trump is to take back the U.S. House. And so every U.S. House district matters, and in particular, the competitive ones matter. And so in Minnesota, you have 4 competitive races, and so that's why it's been such a national focus. I'm going to run through these races in sequential order, and we'll start with District 1. So District 1 is in southern Minnesota. It's mostly agricultural communities and farm country, but it does include Rochester, home of the Mayo Clinic and one of the state's bigger cities. It also includes Winona. That district has been held by Tim Walz, who we talked about. He vacated that seat to run for governor, and so we have 2 new faces running to take that district. The Democrat is a man named Dan Feehan. The Republican is a man named Jim Hagedorn. Feehan is similar to Walz in that he's a former teacher and a former veteran. That was a 3rd down as well, right?
That was a big play by me.
We nearly sacked him. We got good pressure on him, but he took the check down and you stopped him. Another potential fake here, you think?
I don't know.
Well, we'll see if they can make the long kick. They've got Prater, right? He's a good kicker.
Oh, he's got a boot, too.
Yeah, so it looks like he puts it through. But still a 7-point game. Another fun fact about Dan Feehan is that he's a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School, Master in Public Policy
Do you
program.
know anyone that went there?
I am a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School Master in Public Policy program.
No.
And so I share that with Dan Feehan. His opponent, Jim Hagedorn, he has run against Tim Walz twice before. The past 2 terms he ran against Walz. He came within a percentage point of beating him in 2016. The really interesting thing about this district is that Donald Trump carried the district in 2016 by a pretty sizable amount, but Tim Walz still managed to win the district by about a percentage point. With Walz moving on to run for governor, I think Hagedorn is very hopeful that he can take the district. He's licking his chops that this is finally third time's the charm, and he can take this district. Accordingly, nationally, this is one of the Republicans' best pickup opportunities.
Get off of Morgan, please.
I can run that play well.
You did? Well, last time you just ran up the middle.
Well, no, You can trust me.
All right.
It looks like it's man defense.
Get upfield. Get upfield.
Man outside.
I go up.
Well,
up in that moment when you got him beat.
All right. I'll let the computer run that one next time. But I will note that all of our many successes with that play were usually human-to-human connections. Usually. And so, yeah, nationally, Republicans see this as one of their best opportunities to pick up a district that has been held by Democrats. Now, the narratives in this race, Hagedorn has been trying to really present Feehan as a super liberal person. They haven't really outright called him a carpetbagger, but I think what they're ultimately trying to get at is that he's a bit of a carpetbagger. He's a liberal elite, as it were, whereas Hagedorn is a local figure who's been around. And Hagedorn has been arguing that in terms of the fundamentals, this is a Republican district and it should elect a Republican. The polls in that district have been super close. They've shown both Hagedorn. Oh, he didn't even get the handoff to the running back because of the edge rush.
He got a little gain though.
That's better. Yeah, that's manages to make something out of it. Big third down here. The polls have been pretty back and forth, with Feehan ahead in some of them, Hagedorn ahead in others, but most of them within the margin of error. And so that'll be a really fascinating race to watch. Moving on to District 2. District 2 covers the southern suburbs of the Twin Cities. The district is currently represented by Jason Lewis, a Republican. Jason Lewis is running against Angie Craig, who is a healthcare executive. Angie Craig ran against Lewis in 2016, so this is a rematch. And Jason Lewis had the Trump bump behind him in 16, but this election should be far more favorable for Angie Craig. We're marching here right before half. And I think Thielen's been racking up the yards mostly on that play.
Yeah, that play is good for us when they're in man coverage.
So Jason Lewis, before getting elected to Congress, was a media personality. He was a very high-profile Republican radio host, almost in the mold of a Rush Limbaugh or a Glenn Beck. And so one of the narratives of this election has been some of the more controversial things that he said while he was on the radio. Latavius can't get by the defensive back there. I would have figured he could just run him over.
Me too. Here's a Slay is a pretty good player on this game.
Yeah, he's having a good game. It would be great to get a touchdown here right before half. We've got about 50 seconds. So yeah, Jason Lewis has said some pretty controversial things about women, and he was a firebrand, so he would say crazy things, and so the Democrats have been trying to hang that on him. I don't know if that was more of an issue of a bad pass or if the way Morgan played that wasn't good, but he had great position.
He should have been wide open.
Should have been a catch and run touchdown, really. I think that was more ball placement, but who knows? All right, I'm going straight ahead. We do what we've... Oh, Detroit calls a timeout. That's interesting.
That ball back.
So much has been made nationally about how this should be a really favorable election for women. It's been called. There's been a large upswing in women candidates, and with all the outrageous things that have been happening with President Trump, the things he's said about women, the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation certainly brought this to mind as well. It's expected to be potentially a very large year for women running for office. And so in terms of this rematch between Andrew Craig and Jason Lewis, you could expect to see what has been a Republican district for a while. The southern suburbs have been represented by a Republican for quite a while. Before Jason Lewis was first elected, it was represented by longtime Congressman John Kline, also a Republican. Some of the dynamics we're seeing give the Democrats a good chance to pick up this district for the first time in a while. The other thing that's been talked about a lot in terms of the national political map is that the suburbs are going to be key. That if the Democrats can pick up suburban districts and they can make the suburbs part of their changing coalition, that they'll take back control of the House. And so this is an example where you see that in action, a suburban district potentially going from red to blue.
Mm.
We're heading into halftime, down by 4. I wouldn't expect, barring any catastrophe here, I wouldn't expect Detroit to make anything happen, right?
That's the hope.
And we get the ball back at the start of the second half, yes?
Yep.
So we're moving right along to District 3. If you have been seeing lots of negative political ads, it's most likely that the ads the ads that stick in your mind.
Yeah, I've seen a few.
Have come from District 3. District 3, we have incumbent Republican Eric Paulson running against Democrat Dean Phillips. Paulson was first elected to Congress in 2008, so he's seeking his 6th term. He's safely held this district for a while. The Democrats have long harbored ambitions of taking it back, but just have never been able to break through. It seems like this year may just be their chance to finally break through and knock out Eric Paulson. So Dean Phillips, his opponent, is an independent businessman. He has worked for cycling apparel startups. He's run coffee shops. He's run distilleries. And I think most prominently, at least in my mind, he worked for Talenti Gelato. So if you're a fan of Talenti Gelato, Dean Phillips is involved in that business. Dean Phillips has been running on a platform of better politics, on particularly getting money out of politics. He has made a big point of not taking money from special interests, but worth noting that because of his business ties, he's been able to pour a lot of his own money into the campaign. But he's tried to campaign, similar to Tim Walz, he's tried to campaign on a message of positivity. And he has a kind of a weird-looking white, red, and blue bus or van that he's been driving around the state. He's been trying to bring creative campaign tactics to bear based on his background in business. Eric Paulson has long fashioned himself a more reasonable Republican. I believe he was a math teacher, and so in many of his previous races, he leaned on his no-nonsense math teacher credentials. But he oddly hasn't. One thing that's been interesting is he hasn't really been defending or standing behind the Republican tax bill. One of the big Republican achievements in the last Congress was their tax cut bill. People expected, given the financial focus that Paulson has often had, that he would talk about that more, but he really hasn't. Nice to extend that play and make something of it. He's also really been distancing himself from Donald Trump. He has not talked about Trump at all. This is another suburban district. It covers the western suburbs, and so it's another, the national dynamics we talked about with Jason Lewis and Andrew Craig exist with Paulson and Phillips as well. And so Trump has been a little unpopular in the suburbs, and therefore I think Paulson has tried to keep his distance. Phillips, for his part, and the PACs that support him have been running a lot of ads about how Paulson will be just basically a rubber stamp for the Republican agenda. The other thing that they've been doing is they've been hammering Paulson for poor constituent service, for not holding town halls, for not meeting with his constituents and with voters. They did a tongue-in-cheek ad where they basically argued that Bigfoot is easier to find than Eric Paulson. They had a man in a Bigfoot suit basically saying, people make fun of me because I claim that Eric Paulson is real. But I assure you he's really out there. And so they've really been hammering Paulson for losing touch with his people in the 10 years that he's been in the U.S. House. I'm going to improvise here with Morgan and just go.
Accidentally hit the wrong button. I meant to throw that to CJ Ham.
Both Diggs and I were in the area. It's a big day for Dan Bailey. That is for sure. We've been driving at will, but we haven't been able to punch in touchdowns. And so most of the polling in this race, I think you could argue that Dean Phillips' strategy is working quite well, because most of the polling in this race has shown Paulson behind by pretty significant amounts outside the margin of error. And so prognosticators would argue that Phillips is likely to win this race, which would be a big pickup for the Democrats in their effort to regain the House of Representatives. These next two races I'm going to bring through really quick because they're both non-competitive. The 4th district is a metro district. It covers the city of St. Paul and some surrounding area. It's been held by Betty McCollum since the year 2000. And Betty McCollum is being opposed by Republican Greg Ryan. But because this is a metropolitan district, it is pretty much a certainty that Betty McCollum will be reelected to represent St. Paul, and the Democrats will remain in control of that district. District 5 is another metropolitan district. It represents Minneapolis and some surrounding area. This is another safe district for the Democrats. That's a great breakup there by Everson Griffin, of all people.
Dropped the lineman into the flats there.
Yep. So District 5, another Minneapolis district that will be carried by a Democrat. The interesting thing with this race, though, is there's been a little bit of a domino effect. This race was held by Keith Ellison for many years, but Keith Ellison dropped out of the race to run for Attorney General. The reason he ran for Attorney General was that... Oh, a fumble!
Got it!
Nice.
Rhodes having a good game. Interception
no
and a fumble recovery.
And in good field position, too. The reason Keith Ellison decides to drop out and run for Attorney General... Oh, that's not good. I think we might get screwed here. Well, it doesn't matter.
Anyways.
We still get the punch. We'll have to drive a little bit farther, but... Keith Ellison decides to run for Attorney General because the Attorney General, Lori Swanson, decided to run in the primary for the governor's position. And so there was a bit of a shuffle, a little bit of a panic, where Lori Swanson decided that she was going to run for governor. All of a sudden there's questions of who's going to succeed her as Attorney General. Keith Ellison decides to throw his hat in for that, and then somebody needed to step up to fill in for him.
Sure.
And so the person who will be replacing Keith Ellison in this district is Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar is a state representative, first elected in 2016, so she actually just served her first term in the State House. But she was the first Somali American elected to the state legislature. Minnesota has a very large Somali population, and so them having representation in the state legislature is a pretty meaningful... oh, come on, Diggs.
1-on-1. Had him.
And well placed. That was a well placed ball. Big third down here. You're going to run that familiar route. Yeah, I'm going to actually... I stepped up a little because I didn't want that guy to come forward. But
I like that.
We got the first. So as I was saying, Ilhan Omar became the first Somali American legislator in Minnesota, which was And in fact, she was the first Somali American legislator in all of the U.S. And so that was a pretty big milestone for America and Minnesota's Somali American community. Taking another shot and another drop. Those are proving really hard to convert.
Yeah, they're one-on-one on the outside, and I'm trying to break a big gain here.
Yeah, next time when we're not talking about the election, we'll have to look at how this Detroit secondary looks, because it feels like they've been having a pretty good day. Running this way. Ooh. Oh, you're mid-slide there.
Throw the flag.
It's a late slide, but we're at 3rd and inches.
And you know what that means.
And we all know what that means. And so, if all goes to script and Ilhan Omar is elected to Congress on Election Day, she will be the first Muslim American woman elected to the U.S. House. And so she'll be continuing. He didn't do the typical tuck and dive.
I don't think he got it.
So for the second time in this game, we'll have to do 2 QB sneaks in a row. We're just out of field goal range, and so I think this is a sensible play here.
We're way out of field goal range.
And so what's interesting about... Oh, I thought we were at their 40. We're on our own 40. Again, that guy goes unblocked. And we don't get it.
Oh, my goodness.
I guess the quarterback sneak isn't foolproof after all. Well, that's disappointing.
Jim, I hope you're watching.
Yeah, I hope so too. That defensive lineman went unblocked both times, and Kirk couldn't even tuck and go low, which is usually what you see. Got him.
There we go. Good job.
Yeah. I was actually jumping forward because I thought it was a run play, but fortunately Richardson jumped just far enough to get at Stafford's feet. The interesting dynamic, because this district was such a democratically favored district, the real race was the primary. Who was going to win the primary? And that race was between Ilhan Omar and a former state legislator named Margaret Anderson Kelleher. What Kelleher brought to the table is a lot of experience. She was the majority leader in the Minnesota State House for many years. Meanwhile, what Ilhan Omar brought to the table is that she rallies a new community to politics, and because of all these barriers and milestones that she's breaking through, she's a bit of a rising star in the Democratic Party, and she's also a powerful fundraiser. And so she's able to raise funds for the DFL, the Democratic Party, nationally. And because this district will stay democratically aligned for a long time, she's young, and so she can hold this office for a long time and be in Congress for a while.
Hoping to get some pressure with our front 4.
Because we've got a 3rd and long here.
Oh! That's how you answer.
Yep, Stafford underthrew it, and it bounces right into the lineman. And so perhaps people have seen that Ilhan Omar has gotten a lot of national media attention. I believe she was on the cover of Time magazine for I think like a Year of the Woman cover, or for a special coverage, a cover commemorating something of that sort. And so I think the Democratic Party is very happy to have her as part of their stable. We've got 3 congressional districts to go. And so I'm going to rattle through them as quick as I can because we're coming up to the end of the 3rd quarter here. District 6 is another safe one. This is a suburban district. The race is Republican Tom Emmer versus Democrat Ian Todd. Tom Emmer is the incumbent. I believe he's running for his 3rd term.
Oh my gosh.
We dodged a bullet there. Emmer was elected in 2014. He's running for his 3rd term. Fun fact about this district is it is the Michelle Bachmann district. So it was held by Michelle Bachmann before it was held by Emmer. That should give you an idea of how Republican-leaning this district is, that Michelle Bachmann would carry it, even despite some of her more controversial and out-there comments and her persona. She vacated that district to run for president, and her campaign fizzled quite quickly. And so we expect Emmer hasn't been as much of a firebrand as Michelle Bachmann, and he hasn't been as reliably conservative. He's been more of a you had me with CJ Ham over on the left.
Yeah, it started rolling the wrong way.
You've seen, I think, Emmer keep a little bit more of a low profile and try to be a little bit more of a bipartisan presence, and so because of that, I think he's got a pretty safe chance of holding on to this district. One example is he has supported breaking the embargo with Cuba to enable more trade with Cuba, given that Cuba could be a good trading partner for Minnesota agriculture. Trump has been pretty against taking that sort of action. Moving right along to District 7, this district covers a huge chunk of western Minnesota. It's pretty much all farming country, and what you're going to see there is Minnesota's longest tenured U.S. congressman. This is going to be Democrat Colin Peterson. He's been in the U.S. House since 1990, and so he's seeking his 15th term in office. He is what we would call the last of the blue dogs. If you look at metrics for this district, it's a reliably Republican district. Usually it's about what pollsters would call 15 points Republican, which is a strong Republican district, but paradoxically, Colin Peterson is a Democrat, and he almost always wins the race. That's largely because of his ties and his understanding of agriculture, and his role as kind of a moderate Democrat, what used to be called the Blue Dogs. They don't give him the catch there, so that's good. I think Democrats are hoping that Peterson will stick around as long as humanly possible. He's talked about retirement, and when he retires, this district will almost certainly go to the Republicans. But in the meantime, this should be pretty safely Democratic seat. Trump has tweeted about the Republican challenger, Dave Hughes, and so stranger things have happened in our politics, but expect to see Colin Peterson win this one. And what Colin Peterson's been involved in primarily right now is trying to get a new farm bill passed. There's currently a farm bill stuck in Congress. The House, it's in conference committee. The House passed a more conservative farm bill that's going to attach work requirements to food stamps and is going to advance some more Republican policy priorities. The Senate passed a more moderate farm bill that mostly just looks to help farmers and maintains the status quo.
I have a question. Were you the center on those QB sneaks?
No.
You're Remmers right now.
No, I am
okay.
not.
Okay.
I believe I was playing as a tight end, but who knows? You know what? That might be... That's a very good question, though.
Because
Maybe that's why the QB sneak didn't work.
Yeah, both times. Maybe you were on Elfline.
Maybe I was Elfline or Remmers. Well, if we find ourselves in that situation again, we'll make sure that I am not. I thought you were going to ask a political question. But that is a very pertinent question.
Yeah.
Very pertinent question. God, I hope I was not. We'll be able to look back at the tape on that one, and so I can't. The proof will be in the pudding on that. What the film shows. Can't get a whole lot of yards after catch on that.
What did they give us there? 4?
I don't know. I think it's a 3rd and 9.
Yeah, well.
8. This is a big down. Yeah, so this farm bill issue, it's in the conference committee, and the Senate bill is the much more moderate kind of bipartisan bill. But the Republicans on the conference committee are holding out, trying to get their work requirements on food stamps, trying to get some more Republican policy put in.
Get up there.
Good. And so, thank you. That's like the one thing I can do reliably while talking about politics is run that route with Thielen. Just run it with Thielen every time.
Friends, if you've been watching, I run that play about 90% of the time.
And Thielen is closing in on 200 yards receiving. 90% of them probably on that play.
Legit.
We've made it to we're in the 4th quarter here, and appropriately we've made it to our final congressional district. This is Preston and I's hometown district. This is the 8th district. It covers...
Gonna take a shot here.
It covers northeast Minnesota. I'm going to let you take that shot. You got Diggs. I tried to run a little bit of a pick route there. I was the tight end, and I tried to get in the way as much as possible.
Beauty.
If I'm gonna make mistakes and get in the way, I might as well do it.
Yeah. They ended up dropping into a cover too, so I didn't have Thielen on the outside. They had safety help over the top, so Diggs coming across the center was huge. Finally got the best of Slay there.
Yeah, finally. And Diggs has had a more quiet game, and so that's a good thing to see.
Once again, I'm seeing the same thing though. Except I'm gonna go with Diggs. Maybe you want to be Diggs and try and beat him here.
No, I do not.
All right.
I'm going to try to get in Thielen's man's way again. And you had him, but so you have Diggs too. And he drops it again. If you're in doubt sometime, just know that if we run those plays and I get in the way of, if you have a slant pattern going, a slant and a flat,
Yeah.
I'm finding myself pretty capable of getting in the way. And so Thielen was pretty open on that one. But you've got a hat count here for a little bit of run offense. Ooh, good cutback. That's a good 15-yard run.
It's the best run we've had in a while.
So Minnesota's 8th congressional district is close to home for Preston and I. It includes the Iron Range in northern Minnesota, where we grew up. I would argue that this has been the most watched congressional district in Minnesota and the most watched congressional district in the United States. And so in the past 2 weeks, it's been featured in the New York Times. It's been featured on National Public Radio, in their morning edition show and their Up First podcast. It's been featured in an article and video on Politico. This is a big district because it's one of the few in the country where the Republicans are finding that they have a good chance to take back a Democratic seat.
Go.
That's got to put him over 200 yards.
Cousins has 259 yards throwing.
And so what you have here is the incumbent, Rick Nolan. He retired. He was a Democrat who had held that seat for a few terms, and so that opened it up. On the Democratic side, you have Joe Radinovich running, and on the Republican side, you have Pete Stauber. As noted, Stauber has been way ahead in the polls. Oh, keep running, CJ! Oh!
I tried to dive for the pylon.
I was about to make a comment about CJ Money Ham because he has most of our touchdowns. And we're set up here for another fullback dive, essentially.
That's right. All right, don't be any lineman.
I'm gonna get out of the way. I'm gonna be Hill, far out on the left flank here. There he is. Oh, they didn't give it to him there. I thought all he had to do is extend the ball and he's there.
I know. We've got a few shots at this.
Well, and it probably doesn't hurt to burn up some clock. Let's try that one more time. And so this was this has been, there it is. CJ Ham keeps his touchdown scoring ways going.
As he does the flying jet.
Now we want to go for 2 here, right?
Let's see what
it'll make it a 7-point game if we go for 2.
Yeah.
We're up by 5 right now.
I think that's what we do. And you know what play I'm going for?
No, I think I know which play you're going to go for. Question is...
It's called the Thielen Dream.
Yeah. Is it safe to say you're hooked on this play?
Hooked on a Thielen, yeah. You want to be him and run that pretty flat?
Yeah, because it's been working for me. I've been doing it pretty well.
Oh, no! Oh, they brought pressure.
I was open, too. Just couldn't get it off. Half second earlier, and that would have been in business. Dang. Well, we've still got our first lead of the game, and it's a 5-point lead. And so if they get a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, it's still a 3-point game.
His defense has been playing pretty well, knock on wood. But
yeah, and Stafford has been less than stellar.
It's all those play calls, like Belichick today.
You've been the better defensive coordinator all season. I've mentioned that, and so it's holding true right now. Let's finish up these congressional districts. And so, Joe, because Rick Nolan retired and left this seat open, You have Joe Radinovich, who's 32 years old. He's a former state legislator. Where was that going? You have Pete Stauber, who is a former police officer and is now a St. Louis County Commissioner. This district has typically been a strong Democratic district, largely because of the labor presence in northeast Minnesota. You have a lot of mining interests, and you have a lot of labor unions affiliated with the mines, and they've typically been a strong strong constituency for the Democrats. But American steel has been under great stress, and Donald Trump has made American steel a big issue focus, and so he's tried to his tariffs have been largely focused on trying to stop Chinese steel and other foreign steel from cutting into American mining interests. And so because of that, Trump carried this district in 2016 and was very popular. And so what you have here is you have a Republican now who's got a favorable trend, and Pete Stauber has been a pretty savvy locally in terms of getting endorsements from local Democrats, getting endorsements from mayors. And so I mentioned that coverage in the New York Times. Did you know, Preston, that our hometown mayor and the person who taught my DARE program in 5th grade,
Ben?
No, Larry Cuffey.
Larry Cuffey
was featured in the New York Times.
Wow.
Big feature story in the New York Times, featured mayor of Virginia, Minnesota very prominently. And what Larry Cuffey was talking about in that interview was about how he has long been supportive of the DFL, of the Democratic Party, but in this race he was supporting Pete Stauber because Pete Stauber asked for his support, and because Pete Stauber and Donald Trump have been very supportive of these mining communities, like the one that Mayor Cuffey represents. And so the polls have shown Stauber ahead by as much as like 13 or 14 points, which is pretty crazy, and this is probably the Republicans' best pickup opportunity. Nice sack there by Kendricks. The ads, so outside of the Paulson Phillips district where the ads have been really vicious, I think this is the other district where the campaign ads have been ruthless. Radinovich has been attacked for his past. He has some traffic violations, some parking tickets. He had unpaid citations, and he had one marijuana citation. And so the Republicans have really been pulling no punches.
How does that kind of equate now in modern society, where you look at so many states that have legalized marijuana? How does that still become such a reference of negativity?
Well, it's a good question, because they don't, in a lot of the ads, they don't call it a marijuana citation or marijuana issues. They call it, again, the pass rush just was not there. That play looks very similar. I was not having any luck getting by my offensive lineman, so I tried dropping into coverage. But this is a big play, very big play here, because this would make it a 3-point game if they convert this 2-point conversion. And unfortunately they do, which means we can tie with a field goal, but we need a touchdown to get ahead. So I think you have good political instincts there, because most of the ads have not talked about Radinovich having marijuana issues in his past. Most of them have called them... I whiffed on my block there. I want you to know that I was having a pretty good day in terms of blocks on kickoffs. That was the first one that I whiffed. They've called them drug paraphernalia issues. He had a citation for drug paraphernalia. And the ads usually show like really cryptic close-up shots of like bongs, and so you don't necessarily, and lighters and bubbling water, and so it's not necessarily clear immediately if it's marijuana or if it's something more insidious. And so I think that's been the creativity that's been shown by Republican PACs to address the fact that marijuana is nowhere near as stigmatized as it once was. Stauber isn't without controversy, but the controversy with him is a little bit more mundane, harder to make into dramatic, scary campaign ads. He has been criticized for using his government email, his county commissioner email, for political purposes to organize fundraisers. And that is technically against, I don't know that it's against the law, but it's not, it's definitely frowned upon. We saw how emails were a big issue in the 2016 presidential campaign with Hillary Clinton's use of email. And so Stauber has a similar situation where his use of public email for private purposes has been put under the spotlight a little bit. The state of Minnesota ruled that those emails are public data and the public should be able to see them. Stauber, for his part, did not release the emails and said basically there's nothing to see here. The Democratic Party is suing accordingly to try to get Stauber to release those emails and to do what the state of Minnesota recommended. So there you have it, folks. 8 congressional districts, 4 of them competitive, 4 of them not competitive. Oh shoot, that ball's on the ground. I was trying to improvise there because the zone coverage was horizontally across the whole field, and so I was trying to find a soft spot. We've got 3 timeouts here. I expect to see a steady diet of run plays with LeGarrette Blount, and so we need to get a stop here. And he just rumbles for 8 yards there, even though not a huge hole. We're running out of time, so I'm going to speed through a few others here. The Attorney General race. This is the Attorney General position has been held by Democrats quite steadily recently. You have Keith Ellison, as noted previously, running for that seat. But he has been dragged down by some domestic abuse allegations. And so there are many questions of what would otherwise be a safe Democratic seat, whether this will go in the Republicans' direction because of the controversy that's followed Keith Ellison throughout the campaign. That controversy has been significant enough that the Republican Party has tried to connect other candidates to Keith Ellison. And so every other candidate, even those like Tina Smith, who have been polling quite well, they'll try to connect her to Keith Ellison. They'll try to get her to answer questions about Keith Ellison. Prater is going to be kicking a long one here. If he doesn't have the leg, we're going to get pretty good field position.
They switched to a safe. Missed it!
So that's big. That's big. We got a minute, and we have no timeouts. And so we need some late-game heroics here. And so Keith Ellison is running against Doug Wardlow. Doug Wardlow has been... the Democrats have been trying to reframe, get away from Ellison's controversy and focus on Wardlow's fitness for office. Wardlow is young. He was briefly a state legislator. He was also a law clerk on the Minnesota Supreme Court. But many Republican justices... Oh, again he drops it. You had me on that play.
I know, but I had him too, and he just needs to make a catch. I can't believe how slanted it's been towards Slay.
Well, and Diggs is a big playmaker. He's a good wide receiver, and so you'd expect him to make some of these plays.
Win one of those battles, yeah.
Some former justices of the Minnesota Supreme Court, including Republican justices, have spoken less than favorably about Wardlow's time working for the Minnesota Supreme Court. So suffice it to say, some of his past performance reviews are not great. And progressive interests are pretty worried about what that would represent if Wardlow took the Attorney General's office. If you want a primer on what your state Attorney General does...
How do I get into field goal after
I think we need a new play. I think you hold square for a spike, and so what I would recommend is that you call it spike. Hold square.
That's not a knee, right?
No, that's a spike. Or a fake spike. No, it's a spike. Now, what's your strategy
So my
here? Are we going to kick it on
strategy
third?
is, I think we do one more of those plays, down it, and spike it.
Do you think 15 seconds is enough time? I'd be more inclined to do something
Or do we take a shot to win it?
I leave that up to you. I wouldn't want to throw a pick, and I'm sure they're going to play a deep. They're going to be.
I guess I could kick a field goal.
They're not going to get beat over the top.
Where are we at right now?
We're at the 36, so this is a 53-yarder. Oh, you're going to have me kick it. All right. Oh, they called the icing the kicker. You know what that means, folks. Oh, boy. We're going to get this. I think we're going to get the special kicking meter where it's going to be a zoomed-in camera, and the controller's going to be doing the heartbeat thing, and I'm not going to be able to see my release point. Once I start this, the meter is going to go away, and so no pressure. Nails it.
Yeah!
Well, we're getting a little bit of bonus football here, folks. Unless Detroit does something crazy. So, if you want a primer on what your state attorney general does, John Oliver did a great segment on this. Historically, attorney generals haven't been that politicized, but in recent times they've become very political. And so following President Obama's passage of the Affordable Care Act, a lot of state attorney generals went to work suing the administration and suing the federal government to try to hamper the Affordable Care Act. Likewise, since Donald Trump has taken office, many Democratic attorney generals have been filing lawsuits to try to slow down his actions. Actions on the environment, actions on the travel ban, and family separation. And so attorney general positions have become a lot more prominent politically. And so if Ellison wins, you're likely to see a lot of action to try to hamper Donald Trump and his agenda. If his opponent wins, you're going to see more of support of the Trump administration and probably more action at the state level, since he won't have to be taking action against Trump. So we've got overtime.
Probably because you need to talk more about politics is what I'm thinking.
I mean, you've bought me more time because I have a few more races to talk about, and otherwise I wouldn't have had time for it. But I think what's more important is that we win this game. And so these other races are pretty straightforward. We have the Secretary of State. The incumbent is Democrat Steve Simon. He is running against State Senator John Howe. For those who don't know, the chief responsibilities of the Secretary of State are to administer elections. And they also do some business licensing and some other, administrative things for the state. What you really need to know about the Secretary of State's race is that cybersecurity is in the spotlight because of what we saw in the 2016 election with Russian interference and attempts to break into state and county election systems. And so that's been a big issue. It's also worth noting that nationally, Democrats, their Secretary of States have been focused on expanding the right to vote, on making it easier to vote, on expanding early voting, on doing no-excuse mail-in voting, automatic voter registration. That's really been the policy of Democratic Secretary of States. Republican Secretary of States have focused a lot more on voter fraud and voter integrity, and so and what Democrats would call voter suppression. They've been focusing on passing voter ID laws, on doing less early voting, on voter purges, or basically cleaning up the voter rolls. Those have been the priorities of Republican Secretaries of State and Republican legislatures. And so this stuff can be pretty important. Nationally, the big story has been that the Georgia Secretary of State is actually running for governor, and so he gets to oversee and administer his own election. And was that a false start?
I hope so.
It better have been. So you've got a guy who's running for governor, and that hurts. It looked to me like the offense went first, and you wouldn't expect that at home with the crowd noise, that he would jump offsides anyway. And that's on a big 3rd and 3 play. And so you can appreciate the irony of a guy running for office and also getting to oversee the election to get to compete for that office. And he's been under fire for, there you go, that's a good sack by Ben Gideon. He's been under fire for cleaning up the voter rolls, purging the rolls. He's been under fire for rejecting absentee ballot applications disproportionately with African Americans who are expected to vote for his opponent. And so Secretary of State, don't overlook that on your ballot. That's an important position. Good tackle there by Everson Griffin. And we got a big third down. The last statewide position you're going to see on your ballot is the state auditor. The state auditor is going to have Democrat Julie Blaha versus Republican Pam Mira. For those who don't know what the county auditor does, what the auditor does is they basically audit how local government money is spent. And so they're going to audit how counties in particular are spending local government aid and local government funds. And so if your county is up to no... Ooh, Everson Griffin coming up huge in this drive. If your local government is up to no good and they're...
Start making trouble in your neighborhood?
Yeah, they're misusing funds or they're doing corrupt things, the state auditor is expected to address that. So this has also not been a super politicized position. It's a pretty functionary position, but for what it's worth, the Democrat, Blaha, she is a former teacher and a labor leader. She's been talking about wanting to give local governments more free audits, make those services more available and expand upon them. The Republican Mira is a former state rep, and for her part, she is looking to expand the powers of the office to do more auditing of state government. And so currently the state auditor doesn't audit state government much, but the Republican candidate has talked about wanting to audit state agencies. For the real government nerds here, that duty has typically fallen upon the office of the legislative auditor, which is part of the Minnesota legislature. All right, we got 2nd and 4. We're running B play. And there's that man. Oh, but he dropped it. Big 3rd and 4 here. Are you going to run it again? Or are
you know it. If it ain't broke...
I thought you might want to consider one of those slant patterns where I can get in the way.
I like this.
My fault on that one, though. I did a run after catch, and I maybe should have done a possession here. Oh, you got tons of room. Slide. You wouldn't want a QB fumble at this stage of the game. We are nearly in field goal range.
There, man.
We could probably run this. We've got time on our side. I don't know how the hat count looks. Who do you want me to get in the way of? Well, Thielen's got tons of room here.
I don't want to. I'm going to run it. We're going to go a little I-form formation. We got the hat count.
Oh, there's some good room. How does juke him out of his shoes?
Or just truck him. Or truck him, forward.
Yeah. Well, that's a good 5-yard gain, though. I'd say keep doing that. Keep running it. The last thing I want to talk about is state legislative races. So in 2018, in terms of your state races, typically you're only going to see Minnesota House members on the ballot. But there's a special election in the Minnesota State Senate. And that's because of the Al Franken, Tina Smith dynamic. So Al Franken resigns. Tina Smith, as the lieutenant governor, is appointed as the new U.S. senator. The state then needs a new lieutenant governor. And that person becomes the most senior official in the state senate. And so a Republican state senator named what was his yardage?
20 receptions, 241 yards.
Oh boy!
I think 200-something yards.
And so, are you just going to kick it here, or are you going to try to inch us up a little?
I don't know. I think I'm going to try to get us to the middle of the field.
So maybe one play and then a field goal to win it. And so Michelle Fischbach was a Republican state senator. She ascended to lieutenant governor. There was a bunch of legal wrangling about whether she could be both a senator and the lieutenant governor. She ultimately needed to leave her Senate seat to become the lieutenant governor. This was really important because the Republicans only had a 1-seat advantage in the state Senate. It was 34 Republicans and 33 Democrats, and so now it is. Oh, I missed the block.
Oh my god!
But you get what you wanted to do anyway.
Yeah, but I wanted some yards.
Well, Bailey's been having a great day. You could run another one.
What is this yardage right now?
50 or no? Well, this is going to be 10. This is going to be maybe like a 40 something kick. And so anyway, the state Senate is currently tied, 33 Republicans, 33 Democrats. Whoever wins the special election to replace, he can't get anything there either. We're just going backwards.
No, I feel like we got to do a play, get a yard. We're going to do our play.
Just don't get sacked and fumble.
Just
no sack fumble.
Just get open.
No sack fumble. I will. And so folks who live, I believe Fishbach's seat is in central Minnesota. It's been pretty reliably Republican, but it's been very closely watched. And so if Democrats can take Fishbach's seat, I did the possession catch. If Democrats could take back Fishbach's seat, they would then get control of the state
21st
Senate.
Reception. I think he might have just tied an NFL record.
I wonder what the record is. 250 yards.
I think it's 21 or 22 receptions by Brandon Marshall.
Huh. Fun fact.
I think I had him on my fantasy team.
Oh, you're going to kick it? Oh, you were on the meter. The meter had started, and they still iced you.
I know. Now I'm nervous. I've never done the ice thing. I've never done the icing thing.
You can do it, man. Just remember your timing. I can kick it if you want me to. And Bailey has the big day. Was that his 5th or 6th field goal of the day? 1 touchdown. Overtime victory. Woo! So I'm just going to, in the post game here, I just want to talk to you about your Minnesota House races. The Republicans currently have a pretty big majority in the Minnesota State House, 77 seats to 57. And so the Democrats would need to pick up 11 seats to take back the chamber. And so that's going to be what you're going to watch for in the Minnesota State House, is whether the Democrats can be competitive in enough districts to take back the State House. Fun fact here is that a 67 to 67 tie is possible. It happened once in 1979. When the Democrats had a huge advantage, but they lost a bunch of seats, and that is known in Minnesota history as the Minnesota Massacre. And so if there's a little bit of a mini massacre in favor of the Democrats, then you could see another tie, another 67 tie. And so we didn't have time to get to your local races. We didn't get time to talk about judges. But for those of you looking for a primer on Election Day, what to expect on your ballot, for those, any non-Minnesotans looking to get a primer on Minnesota politics, this was hopefully helpful for you. I had a lot of fun talking about politics for the last hour or so, and you got us a victory.
That's right. I didn't have a great day with Kirk Cousins. Started a little sloppy. It's been a while since I've played, but we made it work, and we had a pretty historic day with Adam Thielen here. 21 receptions, 250 yards with the play, my play.
Yeah.
And, made it work out. A lot of kicks here by Dan Bailey. 6 for 6. Whew. Could use that in real life, eh?
Yeah, he comes up big. So closing thoughts here, I want to remind everybody about the Extra Life donation. So if you want to support Gillette Children's Hospital in Minneapolis, go to extra-life.org/participant/press-Skol. The link was in the chat here on the Twitch stream, so would definitely appreciate anybody who jumps in on that. I want to thank everybody for watching, for listening to my political ramblings. We have next week off. The Vikings are on a bye next week.
That's right.
And so we're going to take the week off. But thanks, everybody, for watching. The Madden Detroit Lions fall to 0-8.
Boom.
With the dramatic overtime victory. That almost feels like exorcising the demons of that Golden Tate overtime victory.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, Skol Vikings.
Woo!
Skol Vikings. Oh, I'm holding your controller. Where's the other controller?
Here you go.
I can't stop broadcasting with my controller. are we? There we are. Skol Vikings.